Okay, Ambika, I just want to go back a little bit to 2009 and to talk about when this word reconciliation kind of entered our vocabulary and everyone was all gung-ho about it. And then, I also, as an artist, tried to get involved. But by about 2013 or 14, I sort of realized that as a concept, it wasn't really working here. And I think that was it became the general consensus. What is reconciliation? Do we even know what it means? And do people want it in the first place, right? Now, at the time, again around 2014, 2015, this opinion started coming out that you can't force reconciliation on people. And then very recently, I think a couple of days ago, someone else saying, well, I said that you can't force it on people. It has to be something that is realized, and only when it's realized will it be accepted. So first of all, I want to ask, what is your opinion on that thought, that way of thinking?
I would say I have a problem with the way the word reconciliation has been used.
Yeah.
Because I believe reconciliation is something that happens naturally when you have dealt with truth, justice, and reparation.
Oops.
It should be the natural outcome.
Yeah.
Right? That is what happens naturally. One hopes when you deal with the underlying issues, the causes and demands, then naturally you might have a situation where there is trust, there is rebuilding of relationships.
Yeah.
Therefore, that is my take on the word reconciliation. But as to whether it can't be forced, etc., for the affected people, I don't think you or I or anyone else has a right to say you can't demand justice. You can't demand to know the truth now because it's not convenient, it's not pragmatic. Sit quietly until it's convenient.
Yes.
Well, for about 100 mothers and fathers of families that disappeared who died during just the last 2 years, the time apparently still hasn't come, right? So therefore, I would say that position is something that is completely disconnected from the realities of the affected people. It also lacking in respect and empathy, I feel. It really does. And you're not centering the survivor in that work. Secondly, what is happening now is the result of hard work, because there have been people who since, or even before 2009, but definitely since 2009, who have been documenting, who have been speaking, who have been advocating, keeping this on the agenda, who have been labeled terrorist and anti-national for doing so. It is only because that work was done that there might be realizations among certain people. Oh my, okay, now I understand that the problem is with the state, that this community was discriminated because they're being violent towards us. So imagine what they did there during the last stages when there were no journalists, when there were no cameras. So the realization is beginning to dawn. But it's only because we've been talking, some people, about the last stages, about the violations, because the families that disappeared have been protesting and trying to get their voices heard, that you have this realization. Nothing happens naturally, in the sense of people don't just come to that realization. How would they? They need to hear something. They need to see something. They need to read something. They need to talk. If not, everyone will be in their bubble. Therefore, I don't agree with that. And I feel like perhaps those positions are also quite technocratic, quite simplistic. Because when you work with communities, when you work with affected persons, when you work or you're trying to work or trying to get state institutions to give remedies, that is when you understand, these simplistic recommendations and whatnot. I used to say when I was at the Human Rights Commission, I also used to write these short, medium term, long term recommendations, when I was at the UN or when I was at civil society. at the Human Rights Commission, I said, or actually I would take all my recommendations, build a bonfire and burn it.
Yeah.
Because I realized how bringing about change, particularly within institutions, is a difficult, complex, long-term process that also needs a lot of other change. So for instance, you can't just say, oh, let's give more power to the Human Rights Commission, as I said. It's not going to work because you know why? You need to change the fact that they can't hire people that they want. You need to change a lot of other things in order for one particular institution to function properly. So it's not just changing the laws that are applicable, but also the practices, the attitudes. Everything goes together. In Sri Lanka, we believe you change a law and there is change. It doesn't happen. Example I'll give you is 2005, because I was at the time also involved in civil society efforts, and we engaged with the state at the time, drafting law, Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. So at the time, all the women's groups wanted to, create a separate offense of domestic violence, but the government did not want it. So the best thing that we could get at the time was to come up with this law in 2005, which was mainly about issuing protection orders. Right? Now, 2005, it's 2022, right? Even now, women find it very difficult to obtain protection orders. It's not exactly easy because although the law empowers the policeman to apply for a protection order on behalf of the women, most police do not know it. Even if they do know it, they're not willing to apply for it. The judges may not want to give it because they still believe it's breaking up the family.
That's right, and the family unit, no matter what, comes first.
And also the house. So you can ask for a protection order that prevents the man from, or the abuser, from coming into the
house,
the marital place of residence. But of course, judges might think, but how can you prevent a man from coming
entering his own home?
Exactly. So all to say, because we didn't tackle patriarchy, sexism and misogyny, although you have that law which is supposed to help women, in practice it does not, which is why drafting law alone is just not enough. It goes hand in hand with changing attitudes and tackling the root causes of any problem.
I just want to take you back to this idea of rights reconciliation. Since 2009, just to kind of give it sort of a time span, have Tamil rights, have citizens' rights improved in any way? And what do you still see as the biggest issues?
Well, from 2009 until 2015 was an era where there was a lot of fear. Particularly in the north and the east. And I can even say from my own personal experience, when I would go to the north, you go to a village somewhere, and literally in 2 minutes, there would be men in civilian clothing who you knew to be military intelligence, who would start asking questions. What's going on here? And who is she? And why are you here? Or there would, men in uniform would turn up and just walk up and down. I personally have had those experiences, and it's literally in like 5 minutes. And you're like, how on earth are they doing this? Right? So there was a lot of fear, and particularly for civil society, for rights activists, it was not possible to undertake human rights work openly, to document violations. Everything was also spoken about in whispers in a way. So people worked under a very repressive environment, but still they managed to do quite a bit. And even in the South, there was this fear, right, among civil society, amongst journalists, about because it was a repressive government and you couldn't dissent. So that atmosphere of fear was there if you were someone who was a dissenter, who was a journalist, who reported the facts as they were. If you were a human rights defender, then yes. 2015, one of the good things, and I have many criticisms of the 2015 government as well, but one of the positive things that it did was this opening up of space.
Yeah.
Where people, particularly in the North and the East, many individuals and organizations came out in a sense. They began to work openly. There were collectives that were formed. There were small organizations that were established. And they no longer needed gatekeepers.
Yeah.
They could speak for themselves. They would approach the UN or the international community themselves. They wrote their own statements. Initially, they might not have been great because they don't know
the language,
and how to undertake advocacy. But you can see the improvement through the years, because gatekeeping also leads to exploitation, where people, you can have Colombo organizations taking the information and speaking on their behalf. So what happens to their voice? Are you reflecting their position? The power dynamics, which is so unequal.
Yeah.
So 2015 did that.
Right.
And people got that space, and afterwards they were also not willing to let that go.
Yeah.
I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Even with the young people, they got so used to it. Therefore, which is why post 2019, they didn't want to let it go. They're like, this is our right. And of course, militarization. There was a lot of militarization post 2019. Generally all over the country, although people in the South didn't notice it happening in the other parts of the country, but definitely in the North and the East, because you saw it in physical forms, such as the military camps, the military presence, the military farms, military getting involved in all sorts of
the monuments,
military getting involved in so many activities, all that. So that also happened. In 2015, now this is one of my criticisms of the Yahapalana government, is 2015, they did not dismantle this militarized structure. They did not demilitarize.
Yeah.
So it was a pause. And even during that time, civil society and activists in the North and the East still received these visits. They still were surveilled. But the difference was, at that time, they would come to the Human Rights Commission and they would complain to us. We would inquire into it. So the security agencies or the military or the police would say, no, we didn't do it. Or they would say, oh no, but we didn't come for that. We wanted some other information. That's why there's no need to look at this in such a way.
Detail.
We didn't mean to intimidate, no. But interestingly, after the inquiry, the surveillance or the visits or the harassment would stop. Right? That was the difference. 2019,
it's gone back, it's regressed.
It's definitely gone back.
But the people of the North are not willing to accept it.
They're not, in the sense of they're not frightened about it anymore. They, as I said, to them it's normalized, so they take it. But also increasingly they're challenging it and asking, well, is this a problem? Why is it a problem for us to gather together? We're not doing anything illegal. This is our right, constitutional right. So they are pushing back and demanding their rights. So I would say where the rights are concerned, political solution for the ethnic conflict. We still don't have that.
No.
There is militarization. There is justice for human rights violations. And even language rights. 1987 and this is 2022. Where are we? Where language rights are concerned.
Wasn't it in 2019? There was something at Jaffna University, all the circulars were sent in Sinhala.
Oh, but that's normal. In the sense of it's something that happens often. I mean, it used to happen when I was at the Human Rights Commission, even to me, and I've said this openly. Like board papers, certain things would come in Sinhala, and I've had to say many times, I'm sorry, give it to me in Tamil then.
Yeah.
Tamil or English, not in Sinhala. But the fact is, it's become so normalized that they don't think that this person does not speak this language or is not proficient, and also that this person has a constitutional right to receive documents in a language they can understand.
Because language rights is part of feeling like you're a citizen of a place. It's part of your identity. It's part of what helps you feel like, here I am, I belong in this place. And it's part of your right as a citizen. And when you forget that, I think you come to a situation where we are in now, where there's so much, like you say, nuance. There's so much nuance. It isn't just about, oh, now we're all together and we all love each other. It's thinking and talking. I think the thinking and talking has started, but it needs to go on. It needs to spread. And I think people just really need to stop feeling afraid. Can I just tell you though, the whole situation, it came to me really starkly in 2017. I was in a tiny village in Vaunia. I can't even call it a village. It was being built, and we were doing this 3-day workshop with children. And we were playing a game, and it was tag or something, and you say freeze, and everyone has to freeze. So I was there, and my interpreter was kind of shouting out all the instructions, and at one point he said freeze. And there were 3 children who just went down on the ground like this. Yeah. And it broke my heart. It broke my heart, and that in those few seconds brings home the reality of what we here are facing and what children are facing, never mind the adults, but children growing up in this atmosphere. It just it destroyed me. I went away and I rewrote the whole workshop.
But see, you brought up a very important point, which is, you said, we don't, some people don't know the realities of someone else or what someone else has gone through.
Yeah.
And I think that is where, even if we're talking about any sort of change, it's empathy. What we are lacking sometimes is empathy.
Yeah.
Because if you place yourself in someone else's shoes, then you would understand.
Yeah.
And that is where awareness raising, as you said, conversations, education, even the teach outs, even social media, because while we await reform to the education system, we can't not do things. And it's not just the NGOs that should be doing it, but it's also artists who use theatre, art, drama to take it to the public. It is the media. Once again, the media is very complicit in not telling certain stories, in enabling also very racist tropes against particular communities, for inciting hatred against particular communities. Therefore, media has a role to play, which regrettably the larger ones, many of them, have failed at and have failed to even adhere to basic media ethics.
So Anukumara Disanayaka, he's in the newspapers today saying we should go for a general election. What is your opinion on that?
Oh, well, firstly we were talking about cost, but then I saw that it was Nishan Dimel who had tweeted that the loss that we incurred due to certain number of days of power cut can fund a general election. So, well, there goes that argument then.
Yes.
But then again, the problem is also, not the problem, the challenge perhaps is that we have a constitution. The constitution sets a minimum period, and I think that kicks in only sometime next year. This is 2022.
Yes.
Is when
it's March next year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that 2023 is when it kicks in.
It's halfway through the term.
Exactly, and the minimum period before which you can dissolve a parliament. So I think that leaves us in a quandary as to what to do, and people are proposing solutions. If the president steps down, and if you also pass the no confidence motion, then whoever commands the respect of the House can lead the government. And if you pass the 21st Amendment, then you can have a president who is elected by Parliament instead of the public, which means even if you can't agree, you can bring someone else through the national list, someone who has the stature and someone who will be able to command the respect of the public and the parliamentarians, to be the president for that interim period.
A caretaker president.
Exactly, you have an interim government until you get to a point where you can dissolve parliament and where you are also probably in a more stable condition to have an election. But once again, everything is incumbent upon various things happening, and it seems that in parliament they don't have maybe the majority for the no confidence motion, they don't have the majority for the impeachment, they don't have 2/3 for passing the 21st Amendment. And so when there is that impasse in parliament, which is where everything should happen, the question is then, what do we do?
What do we do? Right? And today the Prime Minister has come out in the newspapers to tell the President that he can actually solve the current crisis.
I saw that yesterday. I don't know what he meant exactly.
Yes.
Because the main call is for the President to step down.
And the Prime Minister.
And the Prime Minister.
And most of the 225.
Yes, but of course, I mean, that's really, at the moment, that's really not practical. And but once again, which is where public education comes in, because you must make people why you can't have all of them resigning at the same time. They understand that you are frustrated, you're sick of it. So wait until the next election and cast your vote responsibly.
And responsibly, do it properly. And like Ambika was saying, read up, research these people, hold them accountable.
And ask around, because in Sri Lanka, not a lot of what these people do you might not find it on Google, but if you talk to even people in the area, they will tell you about the history of the candidate. So in your village, in your town, amongst your social circle, talk, discuss, find out.
In 2019, just before the presidential election, I was taking a taxi home. And I was talking with the driver, and I sort of made some comments, against the current regime, to which he just said, I am a Sinhala Buddhist. This is a Sinhala Buddhist country. This is our country, nobody else's country. And if my president tells me that he has to kill me for the safety of my country, he can kill me. So I also want to reference the article you wrote, that is the authoritarian efficiency in undermining democracy. And one of the things you said is that it has been normalized for people to express patriotism by just all out racism and really just terrible language. And it's okay, it's become okay to, spread hate speech. I'm thinking about poor Dr. Shafi, for instance. Suddenly it was okay for all this to be said, right? And now here we are in 2022. How do we begin to dismantle that kind of rhetoric?
One of the reasons, firstly, I think, as I say, if we want social change, the first step is to acknowledge the status quo, right? We can't try to fit things into boxes that diminishes or reduces our discomfort, or to be polite.
Right.
So we have to accept that there is a lot of...
That's an amazing point, actually. We are so held back by that, aren't we? And I suppose you've learned the hard way about, really speaking your mind, really speaking truth to power, and not being afraid to do that. It does have a huge, it must take a lot out of you.
I don't know about that. But
well, you're used to it now. You're fully sort of hardened to it.
But I think we need to do that, because we are there is a lot of racism and prejudice.
Yeah.
And it's not just in one community. Maybe it's because, one community we had, it's a Sinhala Buddhist nationalist state, which is why there was discrimination against the Tamils and discrimination against the Muslims that was institutionalized. So there was also structural violence. That is what led to the ethnic conflict.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, the backlash against the Muslims also, it happened overnight. The hatred was literally overnight. That is not something you can manufacture.
Yeah.
That means it was always there, but no one wanted to acknowledge it.
Yes.
Now, for instance, I remember even like 15 years ago, maybe in Kurunegala once, there were a Muslim businessmen who were saying at that time how there was a lot of resentment against them, resentment against Muslim people because they excel in trade, in business, and they flourish. So there is jealousy and there is resentment.
Yeah.
What we saw is that at the local level, these people were being subject to a lot of discrimination in the Traders Association, which buildings they could rent, all that. That was not seen. It was not really documented. What happens is 2019 happens, and literally overnight, in certain like in the areas adjoining Chilau and Putlam, because I spent a lot of time there after the 2019 attacks, is many of the traders, like they were told to vacate their building, like 1 month, out of here, out of here. And they said, but historically, they couldn't hold positions of power also in some areas in the traders associations itself, right? They couldn't. But once again, not known, not documented, not spoken of, but comes out only at times of crisis. But even within these communities, there is racism and discrimination against other communities. Like, for instance, the LTTE expelling the Muslim population from the northern province in 1990. They were all displaced. And some of them, they settled in Putlam, Chilau, along that space. And even amongst them, of course, the younger generation doesn't necessarily want to return. But there are many, many older people who do want to return because they view the North as their home. But when they try to return also, they encounter obstacles. Once again, discrimination in certain areas. Not the state officers are not particularly supportive and enabling. They're not particularly welcome. So there is racism, bigotry, prejudice within all communities. We have to acknowledge that. But the state is Sinhala Buddhist nationalist, which means the state has power and the state has institutionalized discrimination against the Tamils and Muslim. One does not negate the other. Talking about one doesn't mean we diminish the other. Right? I think that is something we need to accept, but many people don't, because when you talk about, let's say, the LTT expelling the Muslims from the northern province, they would be like, you can't talk about that. Like, no. But at the same time, the Tamils have been subject to institutionalized discrimination, marginalization, violence, and terrible violence during the war and the last stages. We can still demand justice for that while acknowledging, hey, this was also a violation and a terrible wrong that was done to a community. So I think that acknowledgement is definitely the first step. Right? And the second step is education and awareness. So, of course, the education system, history books, what we teach in schools, but also at the community level and also family. Because a lot of the bigotry is taught in the family. Even words they use. Certain words people use in Sri Lanka to refer to Muslims. And if you object to that, they're like, that's not a big deal. That's not harmful.
I'm just joking.
I'm just joking. Why are you have no sense of humor. I've been told many times I have no sense of humor.
But I'm betting after all the work you've done, you don't need to have a sense of humor sometimes. Although I have to say, if you haven't checked out Ambika's Twitter, you really should. So,
I'm very polite in my tweets. But so I think that awareness is important because you can bring about laws. Like, for instance, we have the ICCPR Act, which criminalizes hate speech.
Right.
But it's been often used by the state to crack down on dissent, on freedom of expression, rather than to take action against people who actually engage in hate speech. So this is the danger when you have laws. I mean, clearly, my training is in law. So yes, we do need laws, but laws, punitive laws in the hands of a repressive, non-democratic, authoritarian state can do more harm than good. And the ICCPR Act on, and the provision on hate speech is a great example of it. Because Arnaf Jazim.
I was just thinking of him.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. they weaponized this law. And
Yeah.
even during Yahapalana, the woman with the ship, the wheel.
Oh my goodness. I'd forgotten about
Yeah,
that.
that. Now
Yeah.
she was, I think it was ICCPR Act,
Okay.
right? Therefore, laws don't necessarily change people's minds. And if you do try to change people's minds only through fear of punishment, thinking I can be arrested and imprisoned, that can only go so far, because human beings by nature, before they engage in something, they don't necessarily think 5 steps ahead, right?
No.
And thinking, oh, well, let me see, if I say this, then I'm going to be arrested under the ICCPR Act, and then it's non-bailable, and I'll have to apply to the High Court for bail.
Whoops.
They're not exactly
Thinking like that, yeah.
Exactly, which is
Okay.
why changing mindsets is extremely important, and it starts at the top.
Yeah.
It's also the message that the government gives. In 2019, I've written about this also. One of the reasons I felt that people, even senior officials, at even the Attorney General's department and in other state departments, openly on Facebook and in other forums, they openly engaged in bigoted, prejudice speech, anti-Muslim slurs. All that happened. We saw that, right?
Yeah.
And that, I believe, they felt they had the license to do that because, in a way, the state also made it acceptable.
Yeah, normalized.
Through, I feel, the niqab ban.
Yeah.
The niqab ban, I felt, was a gateway. So because they brought the niqab ban and people were like, oh, well, you know, that's fine then. Now we can harass a woman wearing a hijab and we can harass a woman wearing an abaya. It made that acceptable. The fact that you started all these mass arrests, like, okay, so that's fine. Muslims are all terrible people. So we can say boycott Muslims' businesses. We can say this, we can say that. So it also depends what the people with power, the people in power who are supposed to serve the public, what is their position? What are they saying? What is the public picking up on that? That is extremely important because that has a lot of influence.
Yeah.
Then, of course, media. We find certain media amplifying hate, right? Certain public figures engaging in hate speech, amplifying hate, amplifying these negative stereotypes about certain communities. It's a multi-pronged approach, and I think it requires everyone's involvement. People usually don't think they have to be involved. They don't think they have a duty.
Someone else is going to do it.
And all they think, oh, by passing a law, we'll stop all this, so I have no responsibility. But I think it also starts with us as well.
Why should we abolish the executive presidency?
We should abolish the executive presidency because particularly the 20th Amendment, historically, as well as the 20th Amendment, concentrates a lot of power in the hands of one individual.
Yeah.
It also led to many of the undermining of the independence and integrity of public institutions. Like, for instance, historically, the public service.
Right.
That happened because the president had the authority to appoint the secretaries. Then now with the 19th Amendment, some of the powers of the presidency were pruned, particularly also in relation to the appointments to the judiciary, to the commission, such as the Human Rights Commission. But that was all brought back with the 20th Amendment. So these public institutions like the Attorney General's Department, the Judiciary, the Human Rights Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Bribery Commission, all the appointments to the membership is made just by one person, the president. And also we find we have other laws as well, like for instance the Public Security Ordinance, which gives immense power to the president to declare a state of emergency with very few checks and balances. And the problem is that the executive presidency concentrates a lot of power in the hands of one person, which we have seen historically presidents abuse that power. And we also have very few checks and balances. Because an example is, now you can challenge executive action through a fundamental rights petition to the Supreme Court. But of course, also we find that all judicial appointments are made by the president, the persons whose actions you are challenging. So that would be termed, I suppose, conflict of interest as well. So that's how the checks and balances, oversights we don't have, and whatever institutions that exist also, they are undermined. Same thing with even the Human Rights Commission, right? Because you're challenging executive or administrative action. And if the members are appointed by the president, then clearly you do not want to displease that person, and you're also probably afraid of being chastised by the person, which puts a lot of pressure on those people.
Because you're compromised.
And today we saw that a member of the Office on Missing Persons had resigned. He has tweeted that he has resigned because he said the institution is not independent, that there is interference from the ministry, that they do not get the required resources, and he has listed many reasons, which goes to show anyway concentrating power in one place is not a good thing. But Sri Lankans also have they are very uncomfortable with devolution of power. They do not like power being in multiple places. They are very comfortable with a strong man or a savior and constantly looking for people to come and save
us. Elon Musk.
Right, that. Yes, please come in. Indeed. So I think goes back again to the feudal elements in our society.
It really does.
The culture of patronage. And also not wanting to take responsibility. Because often when there is also devolution of power, it means that you can't blame one individual. You're also responsible. Different people in different spaces are responsible. And you also have to be held accountable. You will be held accountable. So people are more comfortable saying, you have all the power. It's your responsibility.
And then at the end of it, it's all your fault. You're all to blame. You should step down. Just one last question. What is your opinion on federalism?
I think we do need definitely federalism is the F word. The bad word in Sri Lanka.
It is, isn't it? Because I do kind of think that it is a way forward for us, just because it does give more more independence, and then you are. It's not just one person responsible anymore. You're empowering other people to also work, and then those institutions have to sort of be responsible.
And also, most importantly, of giving people power to make decisions, to influence decisions in their own regions that impact their lives. And that is one of the demands that has been put forward as a solution to the ethnic conflict by the Tamil people. And there was a time when it was the F word, the bad word, and if you said it, you were once again, trade, jail, TT, blah, blah.
That was during CBK's time. Absolutely, I remember when like 2002 kind of onwards, because we were all talking about it. And then F for federalism, for fear also.
And it was like they brought this constitution, or the draft constitution, 96, 97. Dr. Neelan Thiruchelvam was involved in drafting that, along with Professor G.L. Pires. And at that time, there was also, when it was finally presented in Parliament, it was a much watered down version that was presented in Parliament. It was after Dr. Thiruchelvam was assassinated. And unfortunately also, even the watered down version. I remember the then leader of the opposition, I think it was Ranil Wickremesinghe, was he tore it up in Parliament, if I'm not mistaken. So therefore, and that once again, complicated story, but one of the reasons where they couldn't come to an agreement was also personality driven. Apparently during the negotiations, what different people wanted, which is why it was watered down. And also why the opposition didn't agree to even the watered down version, which comes back to the fact that personalities seem to drive the destiny of our country. And most often, they are the destiny is being, I suppose, we're being driven to positions or driven to points that adversely impact the citizens and push us further and further towards the brink, which comes back again to holding representative accountable for devolution of power, for abolishing the executive presidency, all that.